Okay. So once again, thank you, Corey, for my introduction and for allowing me to speak today. I'm really excited to share my experience and my thoughts. So I will say that I'm going to be sharing my personal story for one, because I think it's important to kind of come at it from a different perspective. And I'll caution you that the story is a little scary, but like I said, I think it's worthwhile to share. So that we can start to look at things in the sporting environment, whether it's a weight-based sport or an appearance-based sport. We can start to kind of have that dialogue about where we might be able to change the language, where we might be able to change the coaching and the goals and things like that. So I'll start with my experience. I've got a little bit of an image there with a starry-eyed little girl dreaming, having big dreams of being #1 in her sport. And that was me. And I think that's the case for many kids when they start a sport and they get excited and passionate about it. It's just really all about the fun and the excitement. And then there's, these dreams of, the Olympics and, being at the top of your game. And so like I said, that was me. I had, judo for me was fun. It was exciting. It was challenging, and it definitely helped me develop as as the woman I am today. But as I started to get a little bit more serious about the sport, that's where things started to change. And as Corey mentioned in the introduction, judo is a martial art, and it's a competitive event with weight divisions, and that's used to classify athletes into categories where there's an even playing field. And so when I started to become a bit competitive in judo and take it a little bit more seriously, I did everything I thought was necessary to win. I would go to practice as often as I was supposed to. I would get frustrated when I couldn't perfect a certain groundwork technique or a throw. And I would continue to work hard at it because I wanted to be the best. And then in the midst of my teenage body still growing, I came to a bit of a crossroads. I was kind of in the middle between two weight categories. So I had a decision to make. It was either lose 2 kilograms to compete at the lower weight category, or try to strengthen my body and build up my strength so that I could compete in the category that I was a little bit lighter in. And speaking with my coaches at the time, which I'll talk a little bit about the role of the coach and how important that is. And my father was actually one of my coaches. But I actually didn't listen to his advice. I listened to the advice of the coach that I thought was going to help me become the best. And his thoughts were I needed to lose the weight. They felt that the challenge or the opportunity for me to win in that weight class was a little bit better than competing in the higher weight class. So I took the suggestion, the advice of that coach, and moved to Montreal to train with the national team. My training regimen became more intense, and my weight initially dropped by a few pounds, which I was pretty excited about. I thought, okay, well, this is pretty easy to maintain. But then my body started to fight back. The more demands that I was putting on it, an increased amount of training, my body was growing stronger and it was demanding more energy. I needed more food to compete at that weight. And so I started to have this kind of cyclical relationship with my food and with my weight, where every time that I would kind of get prepared for a competition and to lose that weight, it would become that little bit harder. And so I kind of went down that cycle of kind of this yo-yo dieting. And the measures I took became more extreme. I usually had a strict kind of regimen. Some of it was my own kind of prescribed way of dealing with my weight. Others were suggestions from coaches and other fellow athletes. It was usually a 6-week plan. And it would start with severely limiting my food intake. I would probably be taking as little as 600 calories a day just to try and lose that weight. 2 days before a competition, I would restrict all my fluids. And I would be wearing garbage bags while sitting and jumping around in a sauna to try and, again, lose all of that excess weight kind of right before competition time. And then when things got really dire, I then started to abuse laxatives, which in competitive sport is a banned substance. But at that point, I was feeling like I just needed to be able to do whatever it took, even if that was illegal, within the sport, just so that I could make that weight. So you can imagine that it got to a point where it wasn't really about the sport anymore. it started to, this idea of getting into that weight class became kind of more all-consuming. And even at one point, my mother, who was struggling with what I was doing, felt that she was having her legitimate concerns. And she said, you know, Michelle, this doesn't seem to be about the sport. It doesn't seem to be about the tournament anymore, about competing. You seem to, you know, once you step on that scale and you make weight, it's, you know, that's kind of what you've won, as opposed to what your initial dream was, which was to go to the Olympics one day. So I'll just mention two instances that are still very clear in my mind where I realized that I had a problem. The first was, so this is back in 1995. It's been a while since I've competed, but provincial championships. So this was a tournament that would decide whether I would compete at the national level. And so, like I said, I had to resort to more drastic measures. So the night before weigh-in, I decided to consume a full package of laxatives. The results were scary. They scared me. I was curling up on the floor of my sister's room, barely able to move, jittery and not able to sleep. I looked in the mirror, and all I could see looking back at me was a gaunt, kind of skeleton-like image of myself. So I wondered, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning, how was I going to hide this from my parents, from my coaches, and from my teammates? I wore a hoodie and tried to cover the sunkenness within my cheeks with blush, but there was really no way of hiding that. I barely made my way to the scale, with my heart feeling as though it was going to be kind of come out of my body. And luckily, at that time, there was nobody for me to compete with. I was really concerned that I might have a cardiac arrest if I had to actually compete. So there was nobody else in my weight class. So I was kind of spared that embarrassment of competing, and I automatically was given a spot on the provincial team. Fast forward a few months later, and I was in British Columbia for the Nationals. I tried desperately not to use laxatives for fear of getting caught, again because it's a banned substance. But it was still getting harder and harder to make the weight. Once again, I had to take drastic measures. The day before weigh-in, already without any food in my body for several days, I took to the sauna while it was open and resorted to running around the hotel room floors with garbage bags on in the middle of the night. I cut my hair. I would run through patterns of 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off of the running with the garbage bags on. And I was escorted to final weigh-in at, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning, stepped on the scale, where my goals were instantly shattered. I was 200 grams over my weight category. And because of it being a national competition, I was not able to compete. And all of my teammates, of course, and everybody else that was competing at nationals knew about that. And I really felt that I was not good enough. I felt embarrassed and shamed that others knew that I wasn't able to make it. And the icing on the cake was Judo Ontario actually fined me $200 for not making weight. So those failures kind of drove me into a deeper despair. And like I said, I shared that story because it's something that athletes don't really talk about, right? And even in my circle, there was a lot of kind of joking, and you know, there was this camaraderie between, like, everybody's doing it, right? Everybody's running around in the saunas or doing silly things like scraping the sweat off with credit cards to kind of generate more sweat, and you know, and then you know, desiring certain foods, kind of leading up to competition, and kind of, you know, teasing each other and that sort of thing. It's the culture that kind of perpetuates this problem, and also makes it that I think it's a little bit challenging for people that do feel that they're struggling to actually come out and speak up. And this wasn't something I shared until several years after kind of getting out of the sport. And it's a shame because I know there's some instances where there's athletes that can kind of reintegrate into the sport once they have undergone treatment for an eating disorder. I was not one of those people, because by the time I went for treatment, I was burnt out. I was feeling so defeated and tired, and I didn't love the sport anymore. I had lost that love of the sport that, you know, when I had started, when I was, you know, 9, 10 years old, I didn't have that same kind of passion and drive that I did back then. So In terms of statistics, I'll kind of switch gears a little bit and just talk from a more of a broader level. It's been estimated that disordered eating among athletes is anywhere between 16 to 52% of athletes. When you take into account somebody in a weight class sport, particularly I'll use judo as an example, that's as high as almost 90%. Yeah. So there were also instances shortly after I retired. There were 3 deaths in the U.S. with college level wrestlers due to drastic weight loss measures. And there was also a South Korean judoka back in 1996, and I don't remember if it was in the Olympics, but he was definitely a contender, and he basically died of cardiac arrest in the sauna. And so, you know, even those events, even those instances, and particularly with the judoka, even though that instance happened and they knew the cause, nothing, that didn't even spur on change within the organization, within our International Judo Federation. And I think that's a shame. That's a shame. And that brings me again to the role of coach. The role of the coach is a very important and powerfully influential role. And again, my father was my coach, but even what he had said and some of the suggestions he made, he didn't want to see me suffer like that. You know, and talking to me about, you know, getting into a strength training program and trying to build strength and focus on your technique and all that sort of stuff, it fell to deaf ears. You know, I was talking with the national level coach who was telling me I could go to the Olympics. All I had to do was just lose 2 kilos. And so I listened to that coach, thinking that he knew best. And those kind of my theory about how influential a coach is kind of became confirmed when I did an assignment in college on eating disorders and disordered eating among athletes. And so I did a survey amongst my judo peers, and one of the questions was, if you had to rank the importance of kind of the attitudes and the beliefs of your group of influence, who would be most influential? So, you know, parents, you know, does your parent influence you most in the sport? Does your coach? Do your friends? And the number one, almost in all cases of the people that I surveyed, the number one influencer was the coach. So I think it's really important that coaches understand how important their role is and to choose their words and their suggestions very carefully. I think coaches need to educate themselves on the dangers of dieting and weight cycling, particularly within a growing athlete, and be aware of the high performance athlete's mentality of perfectionism and taking it to the extremes. So, you know, my thoughts, you know, when I was kind of going through this were, you know, thinner is better, less calories is better, and that was reinforced within, again, my coach and my peer group. Seek out experts where you need to, and you know, look for a sports dietitian or a sports psychologist who has a weight neutral approach. And be careful of what you're suggesting to your athletes when it comes to food, weight, and improving sports performance. And trust your gut when you suspect something is up, and talk to the athlete and or the parent about your concerns. Don't let it go. From a broader perspective, within our various sporting communities, I think that there's an opportunity for not only policy change, but for cultural change as well. And so there was an article in the Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition back in May of 2010 that talked about the need of a weight management control program in judo. And I thought, when I saw this, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I'm really intrigued. And the article describes a successful weight management control program that was developed by the U.S. National Collegiate Athletic Association that was based on the deaths of those 3 college wrestlers that I mentioned earlier. And so they talked about, you know, putting things into place, policies into place that would mitigate the drastic weight loss measures that were taken. And the suggestions talk mainly, oh, okay, I'm okay, that canceled out. Okay, great. Okay. The suggestions talk mainly about penalties when an athlete is caught engaging in these drastic measures, but I'm not sure that that's the correct approach. As I mentioned earlier, with my experience, having that $200 fine kind of tacked on to my already kind of devastating loss of missing weight, I think that just sends the athlete into a deeper despair, and I don't think it really helps anybody from refraining from that kind of behavior. So I feel it would be more important to do away with those penalties. So do away with that $200 fine. Instead, that's an opportunity to offer support and guidance and counseling, right, for that athlete. That's like a red flag, right? If they haven't made weight, then maybe we need to go down a different path. And I also think it's important to have a zero tolerance policy for teasing peers about their weight. So it's not uncommon, I think I mentioned this earlier, for peers and even coaches on the judo mat, again, for my example, to shame one another into working harder to lose that weight. It'll become public knowledge. Oh, Michelle has, 2 kilos left to lose. And, oh, you're going to pinch your fat. I can still see, there's still some weight to lose there. And so I think when those behaviors happen, instead of just turning a blind eye or laughing along with it, I think we need to have some, like I said, zero tolerance policies for that kind of behavior. In terms of the culture, how am I doing for time? Am I okay? Oh, okay. I think having a preventative education approach is paramount in helping athletes navigate their way through choices that they make related to their weight and their sports. And that program could be for coaches, for athletes, and parents. I think there is room for a health at every size approach by adapting some of the key concepts that the health at every size principles emulate, and put that to the athletic mentality. So acknowledging that every body is unique. Suggesting an individual drop a weight class could be counterproductive to their athletic performance in the short term, and most definitely counterproductive to their health in the long term. Examining alternative ways to increase an individual's competitive advantage, such as creating a holistic program that covers sports performance needs of improving strength and power, developing mental toughness, addressing underlying issues in other areas of the athlete's life that could potentially impact their performance. Educating about nutritional requirements for optimal performance in a positive and non-judgmental way. Teach athletes about intuitive eating so they can recognize how their bodies feel when they eat certain foods before, during, and after the competition. And recognizing that at the end of the day, there's only going to be a select few that will really make it to that elite level. Help athletes see the fun in their sport every day, because when the lights dim on their athletic career, they should be left with a sense of love and appreciation for all that sports did for them, not just in body, but in mind and spirit too. And so with that, I thank you very much for listening. And I have my, I think, Facebook and Twitter feed on there. And if not, you can definitely get in touch with me through Corey or through Jackie if you have any further questions for me. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Next up, we have Lori Short Zamudio, who is a dietitian. Prior to moving back to the Durham region for family reasons, Lori worked as a registered dietitian on the child and adolescent eating disorder team in Kingston, Ontario. Her current role as a dietitian at a type 1 diabetes facility draws greatly on her background in eating disorders. Lori predominantly sees preteens and teens who struggle with body image issues, as well as clients with eating disorders in her private practice. Please welcome Lori.
All right. Hi. So I was totally going to say my intro, so this is awesome that I don't. I threw a few pictures up on the screen that you could look at instead of looking at me while I do this, because I tend to talk with my hands and they will fly over the screen a lot. The reason I do what I do is kind of the point of this. I love food, hence the reason I'm a dietitian. I'm a total food dork. I do everything I do for my children now. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I was working in an eating disorder program, and I was terrified to have a girl. At that point in time, my caseload was about 14 females, 1 male, with eating disorders, all child and adolescent, the youngest one being 8 at the time, the oldest one being 17. And I was terrified to have a girl because I sit and I would listen to these teenagers talk and just think, I don't know if I could do that as a parent. I don't know if I can parent someone through this. I remember what it was like to be a teenager, and it is definitely not any easier now. In fact, I would say it's probably significantly more difficult. And so I had a girl first, and I decided that I was going to kind of expand my role as a dietitian to try and think of ways to make her generation better with body image and healthy eating and just kind of that whole gamut of things. So I did leave my wonderful job in Kingston that I truly adored because, quite frankly, Ella was colicky and I needed my mom. So I moved down the road from my parents and started working in a type 1 facility. Type 1 diabetes is a small portion of people who are diagnosed with diabetes. It is the one where your body stops producing insulin and therefore you actually have to inject it into yourself subcutaneously. That being said, it does predominantly happen to children, although adults can get it. One of the main things I discovered after starting to work there is when you are diagnosed with type 1, you no longer think of food in any other way than its carb count, what it's going to do to my blood sugars, how it's going to make me feel, and it becomes all-encompassing. Parents will inject their 2-year-old with insulin, then chase them around because they have to eat 15 grams of carb to cover off the insulin. Or they will say, no, honey, you can't have that snack because they don't want to give you an injection. So it becomes this huge culture of food. I also learned, first starting working there, that words are very, very important. How you teach diabetes to other individuals, how you relate what food is to the parents, to the child. And then I started to notice a lot of very big things that were happening through almost all age spans. And first is when a child is first diagnosed with diabetes, they lose a significant amount of weight. I recently saw a 14-year-old boy who lost 45 pounds in the span of 2 months. Went into hospital with the nurse to see him. First thing out of his mother's mouth was not, oh my goodness, thank you for coming to help. It was, can we keep him like this? I like him now. Which was traumatizing. So I was like, we're going to have a chat in the hall. And she was like, no, I like him like this. I'm like, no, I'm sure you loved him before. And she goes, no, I like this. She could not get to that point. I've also had many parents pull me aside and say, can you do this without them gaining the weight back? The answer is no. But a lot of parents, and I hate to classify them this way, we don't work out our own stuff before we have children. So sometimes we could have been that very insecure person with our weight. We could have had some kind of chaotic eating issues. You want to protect your child from the way you felt, and so you are going to keep it this way. I've had many arguments in my office of, I want to, my favorite one was the argument that happened in Starbucks that was repeated in my office was, I want whipped cream on my mochaccino. Mom saying, no, it will make you fat. Her saying, I know how to give insulin for it. Her mom saying, no, it will make you fat. And so this happens a lot with my type 1s. So when I started kind of discovering that words are very important, what we do with diabetes is very important. I also, my very first year there, I was hired in May. And I started working 2 weeks into kind of prom season. All these teenage girls came in, so their hemoglobin A1C, which is their average 3-month blood sugar check, kind of started these astronomical numbers. And I'm sitting there saying, why does no one know how to do insulin in the month of May? It's because they want to fit into prom dresses. So you skip your insulin, you can eat as much as you want, everyone around you thinks you're eating very well, but you're peeing out all your calories. There is a term for it, it's not in the DSM, it's called diabulimia. And so we started cycling through this. Grade 8 graduation, huge. So I technically work in a charity, so we are I have less red tape when I want to do something. So I proposed doing a girls' health eating and body image group, as well as a parents group. I decided to separate the two for the two different reasons. I started the girls group first. It was quite successful, I will say, in my opinion. Comments I had on my intake, I ran it for 6 weeks, 2 hours every Thursday night. I often supplied a snack because, quite frankly, I'd worked a 12-hour day and was hungry. And I found that I could kind of get the girls talking more when it was snack time. So I did intake kind of assessment, and some of the quotes that I got back from them were when I asked a question such as, can you pinpoint a time in the last 6 months where you felt very self-conscious about your weight? One reply was, I listened to my two parents complain about the fact that they needed to lose weight and I'm bigger than them. Another one was, I had gym class, and that was her only answer, was I just had gym class. She had to wear different clothes than what she was used to. And so I did a lot of that stuff, and out of that, when I noticed that kind of what my parents were saying was one of a huge theme, is when I decided to form the parent group. Fascinatingly enough, I got the largest turnover parents we've ever had for a parent group, and none of them understood the topic coming in. They thought I was going to teach them all how to help their children stay thin, which I found kind of funny because I thought it was very explicit. I think when you have an idea about a dietitian, sometimes you don't often realize that they might not go the route you think. And so that turned into a 3-hour talk that I have now expanded into multiple groups with parents kind of understanding a little bit more what we're doing. And most parents are now saying, I didn't realize I needed to kind of work on me, which I thoroughly enjoy. Kids are very black and white. They're right or wrong. You tell them a food is bad, they won't eat it. Or they'll eat it excessively because it's bad. And so I do a lot of language with parents. I do a lot of, the only bad food is rotten food. Please don't eat rotten food, it'll actually make you physically ill. My tombstone will say, let them have cake, because that is the biggest thing I find. I have seen children who are not allowed birthday cake at their own birthday parties because they have diabetes. And that's almost like, sometimes it's almost the excuse because they don't want their child to kind of go over, because some people think insulin makes you gain weight. It actually makes them healthy. So when I work a lot on that, I still have huge obstacles. I have parents who follow you to this. This is actually another, I should explain this first. In diabetes, you actually do monitor, the pediatricians monitor growth every 3 months. The reason they do this is if they fall off their growth lines, we can tell, it's one of the ways of knowing you're not dosing insulin properly. And so the pediatricians do it. When I walk back into the clinic room with a child and a parent says, so what's their weight? I say, perfect. They say, what's the weight? I say, still perfect. They say, no, really, what is the number? And I'm like, it's the perfect number. And I have been thrown out of clinics, and my boss has been called multiple times about this. The reason I don't necessarily say numbers, I work in kilos, and A, no one gets kilos. 2, they don't understand what a growth chart is, how to plot on a growth chart, what any of those percentiles mean. All they know is the number is bigger than last time, and it is that bad, is pretty much what comes out. And so no, we've elected not to talk about it. We have informed all parents that if your child has any issues losing or gaining, it will be discussed. But we also talk growth, like height growth. It's changing the words. You're going to, when you're diagnosed and we start giving you insulin, you are going to gain muscle mass. You are not, and water, because they're dehydrated too. So it's a big water shift. But there are parents that bring their clipboard and stand behind you at the scale, peering over your shoulder, going, I'm going to write it down. It's like, what do you do with it? I have asked many parents what they do with the number. One family has a book of 10 years of weights because they did it every clinic. And so I think it's really challenging these ideas. One parent actually told me, I am so scared of them losing weight because to me that's what happened when they were sick. Fine, can I just say he's up or he's good? And so it's educate. I do a lot of hallway education as I'm walking people to and from clinic rooms and stuff, because I find that that's where you find out a lot of stuff. As well as I am the dork that stays up on pop culture, because it's amazing what the teenagers teach me about who knew there was a whole Tumblr on thigh gaps, and that they look it up and they compare, and then they take their own and they compare, and just hashtags, and what movies are they watching, and what celebrities are there, and what diets are the celebrities saying they're doing in the magazines. So I spend way too much of my free time knowing this, but I think it's helpful because I kind of need to work on a 15-year-old level a lot of the time. And so it's amazing. Like, I had a girl sit in my office for 25 minutes complaining about her toes being chubby, but that's what she needed to talk about that day because that was the body part she picked that she disliked the most. So I think the whole point of my rambling right now is to say that in all of our different disciplines, by taking the words that we use, looking at the outside forces, I do believe parents are amazing role models. I hope to be an amazing role model to mine. And I think it's working with everyone within that person's scope, whether it be a coach, teachers. Like, I've gone and talked to a Elaine's class before, and that was very awesome. It just everybody that can influence that child. Whatever we do in our daily interactions, watch the jokes that you say, watch the terms that you use, watch what you call anything. Like, quite frankly, skinny jeans is not a great name for jeans. In a skinny latte, give me strength, really. And watch those words. And I will end that with, we have a no saying fat rule in my house. So my 5-year-old daughter came home just before Christmas in tears saying, "Mommy, I can't sing in the Christmas concert." I'm like, "Really? Why?" And her answer was, "We are singing Santa is too fat to go down the chimney and he has to lose weight to do it." And I said, "And I know that you're going to get me in trouble." So we actually ended up having a big, huge discussion about what this actually meant. And whether that's right or wrong to do with a 5-year-old, it's what's happening in the world today. And so I think that kind of being aware, because she just didn't do it unknowingly. So we had to talk about it. So I just would like to say thank you for letting me talk about something that I truly believe in and think that I wish we could just advance that much more, because I would like for Ella to turn 15 and be looking at probably holograms instead of pictures of really cool stuff, instead of stuff that will make her feel bad. So thanks.
So thank you very much, Lori. And last speaker we have is Bronwyn Tuck. Bronwyn recently rejoined the workforce in her current role as a family health team registered dietitian at North Durham Family Health Team in Port Perry. Prior to this, while raising her children, Bronwyn maintained her dietitian skills with an occasional part-time dietitian practice and by being involved in the community with a nutrition focus. As her children entered school and became involved in sports, Bronwyn provided ongoing nutrition support in the form of presentations and programs, both at school and on the soccer field and at the pool. So welcome, Bronwyn.
I have the benefit of being last, so all the technical difficulties are all ironed out. Mine is a personal story. These are my children that are on the slide. That's actually 2 years ago, so they're even older than that. My son is 12 now, almost 13, and my daughter is 14. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal story with regard to my children in sport as athletes, and my challenges with regard to looking at working alongside with the coaches. So my two children started in competitive sports in 2009. So my son was 8 at the time and my daughter was 9. They were involved in competitive, my son is still involved in competitive swimming. My daughter's gone on to do competitive rowing. They were in their sport for swimming for about a month, and I shared driving with my sister-in-law, and she brought the kids home, and she said that they had been weighed. The entire team had been weighed that day at practice, and they'd only been in practice for about a month. So my immediate thought was why? Her immediate thought was why, because she came to me wondering, okay, why would they weigh them? And we're trying to brainstorm, why would that be? Are they getting their competitive suits? Do they need to be weighed for that reason? We just didn't really know why they would do that. So of course I decided to ask the coach. I wanted to know why they were weighed and what the information was going to be used for. And so this is basically what I was told. The kids are ranged from anywhere from about 7 years old till 17, 18 until they graduate and move on to university. So this is what I was told. The older athletes, the more senior athletes, are weighed regularly. I don't know how often that was. I think it was once a month. They were in a line, so they weren't weighed in private, and this was to ensure that they maintained their muscle mass, especially after the summer months when there'd been a lack of training. So they were concerned that, especially with the boys, if they had lost some muscle mass over the summer, they wanted to make sure they were maintaining that. As for the younger athletes, we admit the main reason we weigh them is because they see the senior athletes being weighed, and they wanted to be weighed too. So she admitted there really is no other reason than that, but it had sort of progressed to that. And they really look up to the older athletes, of course. I was assured that the weighing was discreet, that the information was not discussed with the athletes, that the information was recorded to use at their coach's discretion to assess the athletes and to determine the appropriate workouts. I'm not a confrontational person by nature at all, but I still could not see any reason why either of my children should be weighed. We do not own a scale at home. They're weighed at the doctor's office for checkups or to determine a dosage for medications. They eat balanced meals. I'm a dietitian. They're active regularly. They have both continued to grow well. We serve healthy, balanced meals at home, and as parents, we model healthy living by being active regularly. At this stage, we were talking about novice athletes, not elite athletes, not elite adult athletes who have finished growing. I did a little bit of research around sports and body image with body image and eating disorders and found that the incidence of increased poor body image and eating disorders was actually higher in sports where regular weighing is standard practice. And in swimming in particular, it is with swimming and gymnastics, and now judo, as we know, the incidence is higher. So I sort of racked my brain as to how to handle this, and I really respected the coaches because even before my kids were part of this team, I wanted my kids to be part of this team. It's a great team to be a part of. And my husband was a competitive swimmer, so I talked to him about what he faced with regard to that. And for men, it's a bit different. He has 3 siblings. They were all weighed. When I talked to his sisters, they remembered it as being awkward for being in a lineup and being weighed in that way. So I decided to write a letter because I thought that would be the best way to just get my message across and then to interact with the coach directly. So I basically wrote that as a dietitian and having my husband as a family doctor, I felt that we felt that the risks of weighing our kids far outweighed the benefits at this point, the novice level, and that we would rather focus on their strength and abilities to build their self-esteem rather than looking at their weight to help them build their confidence in the sport. We feel that our children are both within a healthy weight range, and we ask that they not be weighed at swim practice. And we felt as health professionals we're capable of monitoring our children's weight at home and dealing with this issue should the need arise. So then I said you may further consider the practice of regular weigh-ins from the following perspective. Collection of regular weight data for children, especially at the novice level, is irrelevant and unnecessary and may actually trigger an unhealthy body image. Weighing children on a scale does not effectively measure body fat, muscle mass, or performance. Group weigh-ins can make swimmers feel unnecessarily self-conscious about their weight and cause added stress as weights are compared. And I did speak to some of the senior swimmers before I wrote this letter as well, just to get some see what the impact was for them. And a couple of them, the two that I did talk to, said yes, they did feel uncomfortable. They were both friends, even though they're in the line together. They felt very awkward about it, but that was just their perception. Weight in children can fluctuate widely, especially through puberty. And finally, regular weigh-ins make children sensitive to their changing weight, and in extreme cases can lead to disordered eating patterns and or eating disorders. The other part that I was concerned about from the point of view of a dietitian is the information was not discussed with the swimmers. And so if someone was deemed overweight, and I didn't actually determine how they were making these measurements to if they decided that somebody was overweight, I didn't look to see what criteria they were using. I decided I would like to offer my services as a registered dietitian because I felt that they weren't getting that piece. That piece was missing. They were standing on a scale and being weighed. They weren't being talked, they didn't know what they were using the information for really. And then there was no nutrition support that was there as well to support the kids if they needed to learn how to eat better. One of the senior swimmers that I talked to, she said that the coach had said to her, well, you need to stop eating white bread. And she said, I don't eat bread. And so there was no sort of assessment of what she was eating. That was where I felt it was lacking. It was, we need to look at and sort of assess what the kids are eating before we make assumptions about where they need to change. So I felt that that was a great spot where I could sort of fit myself in there. So I did state that I would be willing to provide nutrition support free of charge to the team members, even if we wanted to do it as a fundraiser. I said we could charge something and put the money back into the team, but whatever it would take, if it was to do one-on-ones or to do presentations to the group as a whole about how to fuel yourself for your sport. So this point served a number of purposes. It would provide the team with the support that I felt was lacking. The nutrition presentations to the club would shift the focus to how the athletes could be in charge of their performance, along with the training that the coaches are providing in order to train and perform at their best. Coaches attending the sessions would be provided with appropriate nutrition information as well. And finally, this would increase my personal credibility with the team and the parents so that if weighing of the novice athletes became an issue again, then I felt that I would have a voice with additional supportive parents on board. I met with the head coach after I sent the letter. I asked to meet, or they asked to meet with me. They were very supportive. They were supportive of my position, and they agreed that they would no longer weigh my children if I felt that I didn't want them to be weighed. They agreed that they would only weigh the team at the start and the end of the year for baseline. And at this point, I'm actually unsure as to whether or not the senior athletes continue to be weighed. I'll soon find out because my son is in his 5th year this year, so we'll see what happens as he gets older. But I do know that all these kids that haven't been weighed are going through now to become senior swimmers that have joined with my son. I do know that the younger athletes have not been weighed in the past 5 years. I feel this is a small but really important victory. I felt that the information gathered by weighing them was not only irrelevant, but could actually be a negative influence on my kids and others. Having a daughter that's coming into puberty and coming into being a teenager, that's where I was concerned. I was concerned even before she was there when she was 9. There are instances where it is prudent for a person to stand on a scale and be weighed. And if a person is weighed, there should be a purpose for weighing them. And we need to tell the individual why we're taking that information, because it is something that we're taking from them. It's information. And if we don't discuss it, I feel that actually makes it an important number. As an RD, as a dietitian, I do have a scale in my office. I use it rarely, but when I do, I discuss with the patient as to why I'm weighing them and what I want to use that information for. For young women in particular, an increase in weight may be seen as a negative factor apart from the fact that they are growing. During training, muscle mass is likely to increase somewhat, contributing to overall increase in weight as well. This is where it becomes important to have that supportive coach present, whether it's me, whether it's Elaine as a coach at the school, whether it's any of the people that are, whether it's a mom standing next to her daughter when she's standing on the scale, if she wants to weigh herself and the mom is there saying, okay, well, let's do it together, and being able to actually talk about what that means and making sure that it isn't something that it is something that's discussed if the girl is concerned about that. But yeah, it is really important to have that supportive coach present to discuss the factors with the athletes, if indeed there's a purpose for weighing them. The supportive professional is key. So I do have some coaching tips, coaching strategies that I did share with the coaches. Not that I have any experience in being a coach at all whatsoever, so that's part of it too, is I don't pretend to know what the coaches in any sport need to use the weights for that they collect. But if they are using it, then you do need to know what it's being used for. So some of the coaching strategies that I looked up in some of my research were to eliminate weight requirements and weight-related goal setting, avoid group weigh-ins. So of course, doing it in private is going to give you that time with the person to be able to discuss it without them being feeling embarrassed in front of other, especially teenagers. To educate athletes about muscle weighing more than fat. So it's as simple as, I mean, the coaches know that, but do the kids know that, right? Encouraging swimmers to meet their caloric intake needs. So again, that's the dietitian support. Discouraging team members from making weight-related comments to other swimmers. This happens to be about swimmers, this study, but it's applicable to any sport. So making sure as a coach that if you hear other young people, other athletes making weight-related comments, that's an important, it's a key chance to be able to discuss that. Evaluate your own beliefs about weight-performance relationship. That's really key as well, no matter whether you're a professional or not, or you're a mom or whoever. It's your own personal beliefs are going to be, your kids, anybody who's around you is going to be influenced by that. Monitoring athletes' eating behavior, body concerns, and looking for the at-risk athletes. Listening to athletes' concerns about their weight and their body. So listening is really important. So yeah, as in the guidance as well, right? Just being able to listen to them, or if we're counseling, just being able to listen and to be able to hear what the young people are saying, and making them feel valued. Developing a referral network at your place of work, if it's a school or in the community, so that you can refer the athletes as needed. So being able to recognize those at-risk athletes and then being able to refer them to the program as needed. And if you already know what the referral network is, then that'll be easier to do. And watching comments that suggest that athletes of any kind should drop weights to cut times. Because of course it's important for them to be able to be strong enough to be able to maintain the level of practice that they're maintaining, and by not eating or by trying to cut their weights, then that makes it really difficult to even have the energy available that you need. That's about everything I have to say, but it's been a very positive experience. Like I said, I'm not a confrontational person. It was difficult for me to sort of take a stand that way, but I think when you have children, sometimes that makes you sort of take that step to be able to advocate for them. And it was a positive experience because the coaches have been really supportive, and I have in the past 5 years since they've been a part of swimming, have been able to go in and do the ongoing nutrition support presentations several times throughout the year to be able to provide that nutrition information, and the parents ask for it and they're really appreciative of it. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Jackie Grandy here. I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator for the National Eating Disorder Education Center. We're now going to go into question period, and it's going to be an exciting one, hopefully, because we've got a bunch of folks here in the room, we've got folks on the teleconference, and then we have those of you in the chat room. So, provided that you can hear things okay and you can read things okay, I think what we'll do is we'll stagger this. So, folks on the phone line, does anyone of you have questions for our panelists, whether for Stephanie, Elaine, Lori, Michelle, or Bronwyn? If you do have a question, if it's just general, let us know, and if it's for anyone in particular, let us know as well. So over to you, everyone on the phone. Any questions? Be sure to unmute yourself by pressing *6. Otherwise, you'll just be talking to the baby. So, any questions for anyone on the teleconference? Okay, if you could just say your name and, if applicable, who your question is for.
My name's Joanne.
Okay, Joanne, what's your question?
Throughout this whole conference, I was thinking about intuitive eating because I went to treatment and I did intuitive eating, and I was also a teacher, and I saw with the students, having the health eating program.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like they're not learning to eat intuitively.
Okay, so it sounds like you are a teacher, Joanne, and you're trying to focus on intuitive eating with the kids?
Yes.
Okay, but you feel like somehow they're not getting it.
Yeah, I've done some research and some studies on younger kids who are like 3 and 4 who will reach for food, whatever they want, whatever they're craving. And when I went to treatment, that's what I was taught, to eat what I'm craving. Like, it doesn't necessarily, I can eat chips even though it's considered unhealthy, but if that's what I'm craving, I should be able to do it intuitively and eat,
Okay.
a normal amount, not an excessive amount.
Okay, so let's see what our speakers have to say. I wonder if anyone, Stephanie, Elaine, or anyone specifically wants to speak to that. How do you do intuitive eating with kids? How do you teach them to recognize those kind of hunger cues and so on? We're going to have a guess here from Lori.
Hi there. So my experience, I also have 2 young children, and I tackle with this question a lot as well because I do practice intuitive eating. Recently, I've come across an expert in this area who I feel is a really worthwhile resource to look into, and that is Ellen Sater. I'm actually currently reading her book, Secrets of Feeding a Healthy Family, and it really talks about how to kind of help children kind of navigate that feeding and eating and help them develop those positive attitudes towards food. And so I feel that that's a really worthy resource. Other than that, I don't know if anybody else has anything. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I was going to say Ellen Satter as well. How to Help Without Harming. Her book is phenomenal. She also has monthly web updates. The one thing when I do intuitive eating with kids is I need to get, again, I work outside of the kid as well with the families, but no food rewards, because when you start to use foods as rewards with children, it kind of it takes away from that. You eat when you're hungry, you stop with you're full, you wait until the next eating time. When we use food as a reward, we are interrupting that schedule, and we are giving them, like, it's a positive feedback for what they have done, and they might not necessarily be hungry at that time, but if you give them an ice cream cone, they shall eat it. And it's working from an all foods fit purpose as well. And again, you need to work as a whole approach within the family. But again, I would do the exact same thing. Ellen Satter is guru-ish in that area. And also Michelle May is very good as well.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, everybody. I see you in the webinar chat room, and yeah, we'll definitely be inviting Ellen Satter to do a webinar. I think it's a great idea. All right, if anyone, and thank you, Joanne, for the question. So if anyone is not currently about to ask a question on the teleconference, if you could just mute your line. So we got some good answers there. Ellen Satter, How to Help Without Harming was the book suggestion. Suggestion not to use food as a reward. And then that last suggestion was Michelle May. So any more questions from the teleconference? Anyone else have questions for us out there? Okay, if there are no questions from the teleconference, then I think what we will do is we'll throw it over to the chat room, and then oh, sorry, do we have another question?
I couldn't get my mute off.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you did. What's your question and what's your name?
Alexandria Vashon, and I'm a youth outreach worker with mental health and addiction.
Nice. Okay.
And it's kind of a general question, or maybe if someone could add me to like an email it's about, I do breakfast program with the school. I also do a Monday feed night with the youth center, and I go into health classes. And I'm trying to find more resources in my kit about how food affects mental health. And I've been doing different like mood charts. So I was just wondering if anyone had any like off the top of their head any resources that I could look up or websites that are
Right.
for dietitians or anything.
Okay, great. So the question is from Alexandra, youth outreach worker, how does food affect mental health? Or maybe how does food not affect mental health? Does anyone want to volunteer an answer to that one? We have lists that are not physically here, but perhaps food and mood records.
Are usually really good use in mental health. I do. If you could to get her email.
Okay. Alexandra, do you have my email address?
No, I'll write it down there.
Okay. So, and actually for any of you out there who want to make contact with speakers or who have specific questions, it sounds like we could get some answers for you around food and mood records and maybe some other, written online resources. Email me. So my email address is jackie.grandy at uhn.ca. So it's JACKIE .GRAN like Nancy DY at uhn.ca. Get in touch with me and I will connect you to these folks here.
All right, thank you
for
so
more
much.
resources. No problem, Alexandra.
I have one more resource.
And we have one more resource in the room.
Dr. Stuart Shanker. If you look him up online, he is the guru of self-regulation, and he touches on food and mood, but a lot of other things that have to do with mood as well.
Okay, so that was a...
Dr. Stuart Shanker. He's actually in Port Hope, Ontario.
Okay, so suggestion to look up Dr. Stuart Shanker in Port Hope, Ontario. And there's also and there's also a suggestion in the chat room to check out dietitians.ca. And they put out, the Dietitians of Canada put out a position paper on this topic that you might find really helpful.
Perfect, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. Any other questions from folks in the teleconference? Okay, we're going to go to the chat room now because we've got some questions coming up there. So one of the questions here, any advice for teaching mindfulness eating to newcomers and their families, especially when food has been used for comfort or dealing with trauma? It's a very interesting question. So I guess really what it is how do you do mindfulness? And I think this might be a good question for Corey because you're really good at this. But mindfulness, I guess in kind of terms that are somewhat universal, relatively easy to understand, and that could maybe help with someone who's been using food as comfort. Anyone want to speak to that?
I'm going to deflect it because the DJ Kuba has asked me this question before, so I don't want to. I want to see if anybody else wants to answer this question to see if we get a different take on it.
Any takers from people in the room or around the table or our speakers?
I mean, newcomer. Can we define newcomer?
So I think if we're talking newcomers, I think we are talking relatively recent immigrants or citizens to Canada, folks, I suppose folks for whom English may not be their first language. I think that might be implied. So, yeah.
I generally do mindful eating the same way with most people, I guess. I don't overly care. I would do cultural food because I don't know all of it, and to find out what they were doing. And then I do a lot of the sense, smell, taste, texture, eating from there's a different bowl each time, so you're aware of what you're eating, sitting in the same locations. I use different different theories of mindful eating and kind of blend it together. And I have found it, so I don't know if your answer was somewhat similar last time, but But in doing that, you need to tease out what foods they are using for comfort, and kind of make them aware of it, and being mindful as to when they're going to those foods, what is driving them in that direction, to start be aware of the thoughts in their heads, positive, negative. So doing thought stopping, will kind of throwing a little bit of CBT into that, I guess, and pulling it back to what is driving you to use the food as comfort anyways. A lot of our memories in our brain are stored, but in weird spots. So certain things might trigger a comforting a feeling from food, and you might not know why macaroni and cheese is your biggest comfort. But if you start to realize that's what you go to when certain things happen in your life, so a lot of thought stopping, a lot of thought catching, and then pulling out what that food is and seeing what that food means to you. That's what I do.
Okay, fabulous. And thanks to folks in the chat room for specifying what it looks like we're talking about. Folks that have been in the country less than 5 years, and these are folks from an Afghan community. So some of the answers that were coming up in the room are discuss what the comfort foods are and why. When are they used? I think one of the things it said was to use foods that are, relevant to the culture. And there was much more there that I can't capture in the chat room. But again, feel free to email me if you're looking for any more clarification. You can always email me right there, and we'll get you in touch with those speakers. So that's a very great question, so thank you for that. Any other questions? Thank you. Any other questions from folks in the chat? Thank you to those of you who have stuck it out through the technical difficulties. Again, I do take full responsibility for those, and we're sorry for them. But if there's anyone in the chat room that has more questions at this point, we'll go to you. And otherwise, we're going to throw it over to people in the room. We've got over a dozen people here, so we can ask them what their questions are as well. So I don't think I'm missing anything here. All right. People in the room have questions? We do have a microphone here, so I'll ask that if you do have a question, you allow me to sort of give this microphone to you. Anyone here? Questions specifically for our speakers?
I was just curious, for Michelle actually, how old were you when you were going through that stage of your life where you're going into that national and provincial competitive level? Just to kind of put it into perspective, if you wouldn't mind.
So I was probably 17 when it first, that was kind of the crossroads decision. And then when I went away to the National Training Center, that's kind of where it really escalated. So it was probably between the ages of 17 and 21. Yeah.
Great. Quite a journey you're on.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Any more questions from folks in the room here? Or just comments, perhaps? Any comments on what was shared? Yeah, we've got a question at the end. You're going to have to come up. I apologize. We can keep you off screen if you'd like.
Hi. Having a teenage daughter who's just about to go to high school, I was really interested in, all the positive comments that you made about teaching them about the mindful eating and how it's going to make their bodies, strong and healthy. I was really interested in Laurie's sessions that she runs for teenagers, and I just wanted to ask you a bit more about that. And could you tell us a bit more about them and what you include, what you talk about in those sessions and where they are and when you run them, please?
So I guess I should start with currently what I do is only available at the center that I work at. I would love to do that more. I just can't. What I do is I keep forgetting I'm in two directions now, sorry. We do healthy eating from a macronutrient point of view. So why do you need to eat foods from all food groups? What does eating look like? I like to let them talk.
one of the best things I was ever told was shut up and listen. And so I kind of do an outline, and then I sit and listen for the first half usually as to what they're actually saying, because then I can gear what's actually happening in their lives. My most recent phenomenon is no breakfast, no lunch at school. Some of the high schools in Durham, their cafeterias aren't big enough to hold their student staff, the students for the lunch, but they're not allowed to eat in the halls. So they will go all day. So that usually leads to a full session on metabolism and what happens when we skip meals. I do a lot of what really happens when we diet. I like to ask them what diets they're doing. I do when you were a kid and you traced your body? So we'll do the body tracing, and then we will color it all different colors just to kind of make it beautiful. But we will do it in the I want you to color the strongest part of you, and I want you to color the part that gets you to this on this day, or the part that you use when you do this. Just trying to think of all different ways to make their body colorful and happy. I do I should clarify this. My work location is in the middle of a farmer's field, kind of. So some days I'm like, let's go outside and go walk around and look at trees. I've done a lot from the Sandra Susan Friedman Just Girls program. I kind of love her. And so I've I've seen her speak quite a few times and taken a lot of what she has done, to be honest. And so again, I do a lot of gearing towards what I find out from the very first group as to what their biggest issues are. If we're coming up into summer, we do a lot of bathing suit stuff. Like between this Thursday, next Thursday, everybody's going to go shopping for a bathing suit, and we're going to talk about it next week. And did you restrict your intake? Or with my kids with diabetes, did you omit your insulin 3 days before you did it? And so that I do food and mood journals, and I do what my friend said. So every week we start with what my friend said negative about themselves this week. So so that I know, again, because if your friends are saying it out loud about themselves, a lot of people, I find they internalize it and say, oh my gosh, she's smaller than me and she's calling herself fat. So I like to know what the friends are saying, and that's what I do for the kids, girls, teenager group. It's actually morphing into starting with 12-year-olds, so it's kids group in my head right now.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Lots of really helpful, relevant suggestions there that I know I'm going to take away for use. So thank you. I think we are just about at 8 o'clock now. So unless there are more questions from folks here, in the room, on the phone, in the chat, we do have one coming up from Samantha. Can you repeat the name of the creator of the Just Girls program? So I believe that's Sandra Friedman. Yeah, Sandra Friedman. She also wrote a book called When Girls Feel Fat, which is also really, really good as kind of a grounder and sort of the theory behind a lot of body shame that comes up for teen girls. So yeah, that was Sandra Friedman. I'll just type that in here as well. I think I have it right. Okay. All right. Well, I really want to thank Corey for hosting and for getting us set up when I was stuck in the worst traffic I've ever experienced. I want to thank the folks who came out. I want to thank Stephanie Massey, Elaine Cole, Laurie Short, Zamudio, Michelle Pittman, and Bronwyn Tuck, especially for sharing their stories, talking about their practices and their their personal stories and family life as well. So thanks so much, everyone. Please stay in touch. We do have more webinars coming up. We've got one in just a few days, and we're going to keep having them every 2 months. Usually they're held on site at the National Eating Disorder Information Center, which means that we tend to have less technical issues. So don't let today scare you. Come back next time, and hopefully we'll see each other again.